Okay, so now we have our poorly drawn cottage. You remember the word cottage? This is our cottage. And hey, the other word, chimney. There it is. There's the chimney. It needs a little smoke, I think. Obviously, smoke makes that sound, right? That's really not good smoke. I'm sorry about being such a bad artist. I'm not an artist. I did my best. I did draw this all by myself. All right, so we have a cottage. It's got a chimney. We have a cottage. It's got a chimney. And what's the material? We need to first pick out our adjectives and our main noun. Well, why don't we just use cottage as our main noun? Make it simple. Okay, this will be our MN. Why not? Our MN will be our main noun. And then we have here, what's it made of? Those look like, it looks like stone, right? Okay, so material, stone. Is it big or is it small? Well, it's pretty simple. It's pretty small. What feeling do I get when I look at this whole scene? What is the atmosphere? Remember, we talked about atmosphere earlier in the class, the feeling we get from a place. Well, the atmosphere here is, if I look at this scene, there's a little lake here. That's supposed to be water. It's a lake, some trees, nothing else around. Pretty lonely. Let's use lonely. And where is it? Where is this place? Well, let's just say it's in the countryside. So we'll add countryside. That's where it is. And I'm going to make countryside, not the adjective for this. I'm going to make countryside where it all is. So we'll use small, stone, lonely, 3 adjectives, and we'll use cottage. Remember, we used with for the car. We say with for what the cottage has. It's got a roof, but it's kind of a special roof, right? It's kind of a weird roof. This kind of roof with straw on the top is called a thatched roof. Thatched. I didn't mention this in the vocabulary at the start of the class because if you don't remember the word thatched, that's okay. It's not a really common word. So let's just use thatched as a way to describe the roof. And it's obviously beside a lake. So I think we can put thatched, countryside, we can talk about the roof, we can put all of this in our first sentence. I will write it all down very clearly later on, but we could say, as our first sentence, there is, always a good way to begin a description of something you're looking at, there is a small, lonely, stone cottage with a thatched roof, beside a lake, and we could say beside a blue lake, or we could add adjectives there too, beside a lake in the countryside. There is a small, lonely stone cottage with a thatched roof beside a lake in the countryside. Okay, so that's a pretty simple first sentence. Again, I'll write it down in a little bit, but that's a pretty easy way to describe it, and the picture that you get in your mind is very clear. But now we want to go further. We want to describe the other things too. There's a lot more going on here. What else does the cottage have? Well, it has a square window. There's a little square window. It's a little square window. It's small, that's the size. Don't use small again because we already said small, and if you use small, small, small too many times, that's not good. That's called repetition. We don't usually want repetition. If you can use another word like teeny or little or something like that, that's often better because it's different. It sounds better. So little in the shape, square, window, and that's at the front of the house. So there's a little square window at the front. And then beside that, so we can connect the door to the window. And beside that, beside what? Beside the window. Beside that is a single wooden door. Wooden is the material. If you want to say wood, that's a noun. It is wood. The adjective is wooden. A single, one wooden door beside that, right? With, now we can connect this little thing here. This is called let's call this a path. And an adjective for the path, maybe narrow. And what's the material of the path? Well, it's dirt. It's a dirt path. It's a D-I-R-T. So notice that it's not only the first main noun that I'm adding more adjectives to. I'm doing it for several of them. Okay, so there's a narrow dirt path that is leading away from the wooden front door, or leading toward something. Leading away from means it begins there and goes away. Leading toward something is what it's moving in the direction of. Now, is the path really moving? No, it's not. But we can use that action to make it feel like it is, right? The road is winding up the mountain. Is it really? The road is just there, right? Yes, that's true, but the feeling of it is that it's winding up the mountain. It's winding up the mountain. So, that can really help us make the description that we have feel very active. It's a really good way to describe things. So I've talked about the door, the window, the path, the roof, the chimney, the actual cottage itself, where it is, its location. We have a lot of information. But I want to say a couple other things before I actually get to my story part. Okay, so what about the trees? So we could say that the tree is beside the house, right? We can use beside. You could say beside the house there is, right? Beside the house there is. Or if you want to make it a little bit more active, you could say standing. Standing beside the house there is, or standing beside the house is a tree. And again, we can try to make it more interesting by adding other adjectives. This tree here, it doesn't look very healthy, right? So let's use an interesting adjective. Let's use, I'm going to use the adjective scraggly. I don't know if I have room to write this. I'll write it down at the bottom. This is about the tree, okay? S-C-R-A-G-G-L-Y. It's an interesting adjective to use. A scraggly tree. Scraggly tree beside the house. So standing beside the house is a scraggly tree. But there's another tree. Where is the tree? Well, we could say that the tree is in the distance. We could say the distance, or we could say in the background. In the distance, in the background. So if you look at this other tree here, it's in the distance, and there's kind of a row of something here. Let's call these bushes hedges. Let's call them hedges. Hedges, H-E-D-G-E-S. So we have one tree here, it's scraggly. We have another in the distance, and it's by a row of hedges. So we kind of have all the pieces now. We want to put all the pieces together, and then we want to use our imagination. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to put all this into one clear description, a few sentences, and then I'm going to add what I think is going on in this picture. A little bit of a story based on my own imagination, what I would like to add. But it's very important to understand and remember that when you're describing, first you start with the basic details. First, you make clear sentences that have lots of information. You use lots of adjectives in front of main nouns. And then you can add interesting stuff. You can say who lives here. You can say how long they've lived here. But if you start with that, in many cases it will be more confusing and people will go, huh? What's he talking about? Who's living here? Where are they living? What? So let's look at how we can put it all together.